Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Indar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 24. Tibs was pleased with himself and the situation. The nobles had been put in their place by Harry returning the stolen items. They weren't happy about it, but they couldn't deny the guard leader did his job and did it well. There was only one item Harry hadn't returned, because Tibs had searched for it among the wooden boxes and handed Amanda's picture to Nez for him to return to his girl. Tibs wasn't happy about Nez picking her over him, but the decision was Mrs. and as his friend and teammate, Tibs had to help him. So now Nez was his girl's hero. An unexpected side effect of the thief escaping the other rogues was that not even they knew Tibs was involved in stopping him. As far as the stories went, the success was entirely due to the guard's work. Harry didn't talk about it, which reinforced the idea he couldn't lie. Which reinforced the idea he couldn't lie to Tibs. Tibs is concerned. And the pouch with the powder was destroyed. That was one temptation Tibs didn't have to worry about. His mood was so good as he entered the inn that it made the silence there hit harder. No one spoke. The inn was never silent. No, it had happened once when Harry had appeared among them to scold Serva and scared everyone in the process. But this was different, somber. The glances he caught were aimed at Payan, alone at her table, head down, tankard held in both hands. He couldn't remember ever seeing her like that. Payan was a bit like Jackal in that she was always loud, even when she was silent. He looked around for her team or Crossing. Jackal's man always knew what was going on, but none of them were around. Payan? He asked once she was next to her. Go away, she said without looking up from her tankard. Payan, what's wrong? I said, she looked up and glared at him. Go the fuck away. No. Tibs wasn't leaving a friend with pain he saw in her eyes. What's wrong? Did someone fucking cut your ears off? Okay. The way I read it means that the way I wrote it is wrong. Did someone cut your fucking ears off? She demanded hatefully, getting to her feet. Leave me alone. Tib stepped back as her fist turned into metal with sharp edges and a hand on his shoulder stopped. That's enough, Payan, Joseph said behind her. Tibs doesn't deserve this. And I do? She turned her hate on the server. He meant everything to me. Payan, Joseph said, tone understanding. No, you don't get to talk. Your man's made of stone. Mine wasn't. She turned pale and tears started falling. Tibs pulled out of Joseph's grip and hugged her as tightly as he could. She stiffened, and he tightened his hold in preparation for being pushed away. He wasn't letting her do that. She wouldn't suffer alone. He was going to have word with her team for deserting her when she needed them. Let go of me, she ordered. No. Tibs, she growled a warning. He looked up at her. I lost too many people I care about to let you feel that pain alone. You can hit me if you want. I'm staying. Her expression turned from angry to puzzled. Maybe he understood why the other had laughed. Payan was scary when she got angry, but he'd still talk to them. He wasn't leaving her, so they should have been strong enough to stay. The puzzlement broke, and as she as she sobbed and then held on to him hard enough, he winced in pain. He said nothing, just held her and let her cry. Tibs ain't alone. He wished his team was with him after his time holding Payan and then tracking down her team. And realizing each of them was suffering just as much as she was. And instead of pulling together, each of them suffered alone. Could use a company right now. But Jekyll was busy with cross-ups, and he didn't even have the server to talk. Coursel's brothers and sisters, as well as the town folks who worked at the inn, were nice, but he didn't have the history with them he shared with Corsel. So he made opening up. So it made opening up about how he felt hard. Kirino was working with the surviving Omega sorcerer, while Kondar was wherever he disappeared to when not with the team. Either off or unearthing secret or training. He had to have someone to help him train. As what it was with his girl, what he'd seen of them when they were walking about Merchant Row, she was still overjoyed Mez had found and returned her painting. Mez didn't look quite as pleased, and Tibs didn't understand his friend. How could he let honor keep him from being the person he wanted to be with? And he was seated next to Payan at their table, along with the rest of their teammates. After suffering alone for a day, they had pulled back together, but they were still suffering. Watching them, Tibs reaffirmed his promise to never get involved with anyone. He would never put someone through what he was watching. He focused on his food. Food at the inn was always good, though Tibs didn't appreciate it as much as usual. The steak was tender and juicy, with just enough of a burnt crust to enhance the taste. Thought Russell was cooking today. All of Coursel's brother at the inn knew how to cook, but Russell always made the meat taste better. Excuse me. Tibs looked up, and on the other side of the table, an older man was watching him. Tibs looked up, and on the other side of the table, an older man was watching him, hands resting on the golden handle of a cane of dark wood. He almost sneered at the noble, but every piece of clothing and jewelry was filled with woven essence. With what Tyrannia had told them of how magical items were made, how difficult it was for sorcerers to make them, and therefore how expensive they were, Tibs thought what the men were had to be worth more than the entire town, not including the nobles. Tibs never included the nobles. The man's short cropped hair was gray, his beard was a darker shade and hugged his jaw. His eyes were blue, the normal kind, and his face was wrinkled with age. The jewelry was gold and silver with precious gems of different colors in necklaces, earrings, and bracelets and pins on the green shirt of fabric so fine Tibs could probably buy a new armor if he sold it to the right merchant. The black overcoat was thick and looked warm, with gold thread glinting in the lamplight. "Are you all there?" the man asked. He looked down at himself. "As far as I know. Is there something with magic that lets someone not be all in the same place?" "Probably. Sorry, said sorcerers could do just about anything." When he looked back at the man, he had an annoyed expression, then let out a sigh, and Tibs knew that for as much coin as the man spent on dressing like a noble, it was an act. The sigh gave him away. Nobles didn't sigh, they sneered. Still, Tibs didn't care for the man, who wanted to pass himself off as a noble. Was he one of the merchants who'd come with the caravan and decided to stay? Probably not. A man like this would have been talked about within hours of not leaving with the caravan. In the weeks since, he'd have either been ridiculed or removed by the nobles. They might not care for the man because he was pretending. Nobles hated no one more. Nobles hated no one more than those claiming to be one of them. He must be visiting from another city then. "Do you know a man going by the name of Jackal? I'm told this is the table he eats at." What did a merchant from another town want with Jackal? Tibs hid his suspicion. Jackal sold the loot they got out of Stowe to Darren, so this wasn't someone who knew him through business, unless he was here looking to take coins away from their merchant. If Jekyll knew someone like that from before, he would have talked about it, and it would have been from his time in the pits. Maybe that was why the man was here. He'd heard of Jackal's fighting and wanted to watch him fight, pay him to fight, buy him from the guild so he could fight for him. Nobles did that, buy fighters to entertain them. Of course, if I'd explained that was part of how the arena in Mountain Sea came about, the man was out of luck. The guild wouldn't let Jackal go. There were no fights in this town. Harry didn't allow them. At best, he would have to settle for watching a bar fight. a bar fight. They're suspected not all of them happened by accident. A bar fight was an easy way around Harry's restrictions. The man sighed again. Clearly, you aren't all there. I am, Tibbs replied. Then how about you answer me? The man stoned at an edge to it. Not the threat of a noble who thought he couldn't have Tibbs arrested with a word. This was more like a knife in the shadow of the night. Tibbs considered what to say. I know him. It was the best if he dealt with us. Jekyll wasn't great with hidden knives, and he had to know it was coming to turn to stone. Where is he? Busy with his man. Ah, man. The man's face turned to disdain. Of course you'd do that to me. Tibbs raised an eyebrow. The man was too old for Jekyll. Tibbs hadn't known Jekyll before he was with Croseth, but he talked. But he'd talk about previous times, and they were always with guys his age, or what? Yeah, I don't know where I was going. Guys his age from the pits. He tried to explain why guys in the pit went to each other, but Tibbs had walked out. Jekyll knew Tibbs didn't care for those stories, but he uses them to do it anyway. Maybe this was someone who had that kind of interest in Jekyll, even if his friend didn't know it. But they'd have to have heard about him before the dungeon, and if that was the case, wouldn't they have taken Jekyll out of the cell before he was sent here? Jekyll had said he'd been in the cell a few days before being brought to Ranelagh. Buying a man's freedom was a good way to ensure he did what you wanted. Get your mind out of there, the man ordered, and just forced his face back to neutral, raising an eyebrow. That's not what I'm here for. What are you that you'd even think that? He shrugged. When is he going to be done? It's going to be a while, Tibbs grinned. He and his man have a lot of energy. At least when the two of them went to have their them time, they were always gone for a long time. The man's disgust became even more pronounced. He looked around the inn, and his expression didn't improve. When he's done, tell him I'm looking for him. Okay. Tibbs cut a piece of his now cool steak. Aren't you going to ask for my name? Tibbs shook his head. I'll tell him the guy trying too hard to pass himself as a noble is looking for him. He smiled. He might be done before the actual nobles find out about you. The man's face turned crimson, and he slammed his cane on the table as he rested his hand on it and moved forward. I would watch my tongue if I were you, boy. Tibbs shrugged and bit into a piece of meat, and bit the piece of meat off the end of his knife without looking away from the man. Not grinning was difficult, but worth it for how deeper red the man's face turned. You will tell Jackal, he made the name sound like a curse, that Sebastian Wells is demanding to see him. Okay, he said as he chewed, and then leaned forward even more. Nothing to play with me, boy. I will see my son. Tibbs froze up for only a second. Well, that was enough to make the man smile. Good. At least he told you who he is. Straightened and placed the cane before him again. Therefore, you know what I'm capable of. Consider that before you decide to show me disrespect again. He turned and walked out, with everyone in the inn watching. Tibbs wondered if Jekyll's father being here was enough to interrupt what he and Croseth were doing, then shrugged and went back to eating. It could wait. Interrupting them meant he'd have to see what they were up to, and Tibbs could do without that. And this concludes chapter 24 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. Subscribe, hit the bell to know when the next one's going to be up. If you want to read back, you can do so on Royal Road for free. If you want to read further ahead or other stories I have written, or simply support me, you can do that on Patreon. And if you want to watch me fumble my way through these live, make a mistake that ruined the entire thing and therefore I have to restart, or watch me write, you can do that on Twitch. All the links are in the notes. And with that, I will see you. And with that, days long. And with that, I will wish you a good day.